August 16th, 1977. Graceland. The house was filled with people, family, friends, doctors, strangers, all moving through the rooms like ghosts. Upstairs, in Elvis's bedroom, 9-year-old Lisa Marie Presley stood alone. Her father had died just hours ago, right here in this room, and everyone kept telling her she shouldn't be up here. But she needed to be close to him. Needed to understand. On the nightstand beside his bed, she saw his wallet, thick brown leather, worn at the edges from years in his pocket. Her small hand reached for it. She knew she shouldn't. But she opened it anyway. And there, folded carefully between his driver's license and a photo of her, was a piece of construction paper. Faded crayon. A child's drawing she'd made years ago and forgotten about. Elvis had carried it with him every single day. And now, holding it in her trembling hands, Lisa Marie finally understood what her father had never been able to say out loud. She unfolded the paper slowly, carefully, as if it might disintegrate in her hands. The creases were deep, worn soft from being folded and unfolded countless times. The drawing was simple, the kind any 5-year-old might make. A house with a triangle roof. 2 stick figures holding hands, one tall and one small. A yellow sun in the corner with rays shooting out like spikes. And at the bottom, in uneven crayon letters, Daddy and me. I love you. Lisa Marie stared at it. She remembered making this. Vaguely. A lifetime ago, when she was little, when her parents were still trying to make their marriage work. Before the divorce. Before the weekend visits. Before everything got complicated. But she'd forgotten about it. She'd made hundreds of drawings as a child. This one had seemed like nothing special. To Elvis, it had been everything. Her fingers traced the crayon marks. She could see where the purple crayon had pressed too hard, breaking through the paper. Where the yellow sun had been colored outside the lines. Where she'd written her name at the top, Lisa Marie with the M backwards. Lisa? Her grandmother's voice came from the doorway. Vernon Presley stood there, his face ravaged by grief. Honey, you shouldn't be in here right now. Lisa Marie looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. He kept it, she whispered. Daddy kept my drawing. Vernon's face crumpled. He crossed the room and knelt beside her, his own eyes filling with tears. He kept everything you ever gave him, sweetheart. But that one was special. He looked at it every day. If you remember August 16th, 1977, you know where you were when you heard Elvis had died. The news spread like wildfire across America. Radio stations played nothing but his music. Television interrupted regular programming with the breaking news. People wept in the streets. The king of rock and roll was gone at just 42 years old. The world mourned a legend. But inside Graceland, a little girl was mourning her daddy. And trying to understand how the man who seemed to love his fans more than anything had actually treasured a simple crayon drawing above all else. When did I make this? Lisa Marie asked, her voice small and broken. Vernon settled onto the floor beside her, his old knees protesting. He took the drawing gently from her hands, studying it as if he'd seen it 1,000 times before. He had. You made this in 1973, he said softly. Right after your mama and daddy separated. You were staying here for the weekend, and you were upset. Kept asking why daddy didn't live with you anymore. Why everything had to change. Lisa Marie nodded slowly. She remembered that feeling, even if the specific day was fuzzy. The confusion. The sadness. The sense that her whole world had tilted sideways. Your daddy was downstairs, Vernon continued. In the jungle room, playing piano. He was hurting too, you know. Missing your mama. Missing you. And you came down those stairs with this drawing in your hand. Vernon's voice broke. He paused, collecting himself. You walked right up to him and said, I made you a picture so you won't forget me. And honey, your daddy, he just broke down crying. Picked you up, held you so tight. He said, baby, I could never forget you. Not if I lived 1,000 years. Then he folded that drawing up real careful and put it in his wallet. Said it was going to stay there forever. And it did. It really did. Lisa Marie was sobbing now. Full, body-shaking sobs. I didn't know he kept it. He kept everything, honey. Every card. Every note. Every little thing you ever gave him. Vernon gestured around the room. But that drawing, that one went everywhere with him. Every concert. Every movie. Every trip. It was always in his wallet, right next to his heart. The house below them was chaos. People making phone calls. Making arrangements. Trying to figure out what came next. But in Elvis's bedroom, time had stopped. A grandfather and a granddaughter, sitting on the floor, holding a piece of construction paper that suddenly meant more than all the gold records and sold-out shows and screaming fans. "Can I keep it?" Lisa Marie whispered. "It's yours, baby." It was always yours. She folded it carefully, exactly along the worn creases, and pressed it against her chest. Through the paper, she could almost feel her father's presence. Almost hear his voice. Almost believe he wasn't really gone. But he was gone. And she was 9 years old. And nothing would ever be the same. The memory of making that drawing came back to her in pieces over the following days. She'd been 5 years old, sitting at the kitchen table at Graceland. Her grandmother Dodger, that's what they called Elvis's grandmother, Minnie May, had given her construction paper and a brand new box of crayons. The big box, with 64 colors and the built-in sharpener. "What are you making, baby?" Dodger had asked. "A picture for Daddy. So he knows I love him." She'd chosen purple for the house because purple was Elvis's favorite color. Yellow for the sun because yellow was happy. She'd drawn herself with brown hair like she had, and Elvis tall with black hair. She'd made them holding hands because that's what she wanted, to hold her daddy's hand and never let go. At 5 years old, she hadn't understood divorce. Hadn't understood addiction or fame or pressure or any of the things that had driven her parents apart. She'd only understood that her daddy didn't live with her anymore, and that made her sad. So she'd drawn them together. Forever together. In a house with the sun shining overhead. When she'd given it to Elvis that day, he'd been sitting at the piano in the jungle room. She remembered that now. He'd been wearing his reading glasses, the ones he was self-conscious about. He'd been playing something slow and sad, maybe a gospel song. He always played gospel when he was hurting. "Daddy?" She'd climbed onto the piano bench beside him. Elvis had stopped playing and looked down at her. His face had been so sad. She remembered being struck by how sad her daddy looked. "I made you something," she'd said, holding out the drawing. Elvis had taken it carefully as if it were made of glass. He'd studied it for a long moment. Then his face had done something strange. It had gotten all tight and his eyes had filled with tears. "It's us," Lisa Marie had explained, suddenly worried he didn't understand. "See? That's you and that's me. And we're holding hands. And the sun is shining because we're happy." "It's beautiful, baby," Elvis had whispered. "It's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever given me." "Really? More beautiful than all your gold records. So much more beautiful." He'd pulled her onto his lap, holding her tight with one arm while keeping the drawing carefully away with the other hand. "You know what I'm going to do with this?" "What?" "I'm going to keep it with me always. Everywhere I go. So I can look at it and remember this moment. Remember how much my little girl loves me. I love you more than anything, Daddy. I love you more than anything too, baby. Don't you ever forget that." And he'd folded it up right then, 3 careful folds, and slipped it into his wallet. She'd watched him do it. Watched him tuck it in right next to his money and his credit cards. She'd felt so proud. So special. And then she'd forgotten about it, the way children forget things. Moved on to the next drawing, the next game, the next moment. But Elvis never forgot. For those who remember the 70s, who remember watching Elvis's decline in those final years, you might recall the tabloid stories. The weight gain. The canceled concerts. The prescription pills. The sad, bloated man in the white jumpsuit who barely resembled the hip-swiveling heartthrob of the 50s. The world watched him fall apart and wondered what had happened to the king. But what the world didn't see were the quiet moments. The private moments. The moments when Elvis would pull out his wallet backstage before a show, unfold that drawing, and stare at it for long minutes. Remembering why he was doing this. What mattered. Who mattered. Red West, one of Elvis's closest friends and bodyguards, saw it happen dozens of times. "I'd find him in his dressing room," Red said years later in an interview, "sitting there with that little drawing in his hands. Sometimes he'd be crying. Sometimes he'd just be staring at it. I'd ask if he was okay, and he'd say, 'Just looking at my baby's picture.' Every single time, that's what he'd say. 'Just looking at my baby's picture.'" The drawing went to Vegas, to Hawaii, to concerts across America. It was there in 1973 when Elvis performed the Aloha from Hawaii concert, broadcast to over 1 billion people worldwide. It was there in 1976 when he could barely make it through performances. It was there in June of 1977 when he played his last concert in Indianapolis. And it was there on August 16, 1977, when he died. Lisa Marie didn't learn all of this immediately. She was 9 years old and drowning in grief. The funeral was a blur. Thousands of people lined the streets of Memphis. Fans wailing. Photographers pressing in. Security trying to hold back the crowds. And Lisa Marie, small and numb in a black dress, holding her mother's hand and wishing everyone would just go away. She kept the drawing in her room at her mother's house. Unfolded it sometimes and stared at it. Tried to understand what it meant. Tried to connect with the father she'd lost. As she grew older, the drawing took on new meaning. At 13, angry and rebellious, she'd look at it and think about how Elvis had loved her but left her anyway. At 16, struggling with her own identity, she'd unfold it and wonder if love was ever enough. At 20, finally understanding addiction and the complexities of adult relationships, she'd stare at those crayon lines and weep for the man who'd tried so hard and failed so completely. The drawing was there through her own marriages and divorces, through the birth of her children, through her attempts to carve out a life outside of being Elvis's daughter, through her struggles with addiction that mirrored her father's, through her attempts to understand him, forgive him, honor him. She never told anyone about it publicly. Not for years. It was too private. Too precious. Too painful. But she'd take it out sometimes, late at night when she couldn't sleep. Run her fingers over the worn creases. Remember being 5 years old and believing a drawing could fix everything. Remember being 9 years old and realizing it couldn't fix anything, but it proved that love had been real. In 2003, 26 years after Elvis's death, Lisa Marie finally spoke about the drawing in an interview. She was 35 years old, a mother herself, finally ready to share this piece of her father. "People ask me all the time if Elvis was a good father," she said. "They want me to either defend him or condemn him, to say he was perfect or terrible. But he was neither. He was human, flawed, struggling. But he loved me. I know he loved me." The interviewer asked how she knew. Lisa Marie had pulled out her wallet, her own wallet now, carrying her own life, and carefully unfolded that faded piece of construction paper. The colors had faded. The paper was soft as cloth from decades of being folded and unfolded. But the drawing was still there. The stick figures. The house. The sun. "Because he kept this," she said simply. "For 4 years, through everything, the concerts, the pills, the decline, all of it, he kept this. It was in his wallet when he died. That's how I know." She'd been crying during the interview. Not the dramatic, theatrical tears of someone performing grief. The quiet, steady tears of someone who'd spent a lifetime trying to reconcile love and loss. "When I hold this," she continued, "I can remember being 5 years old and believing my daddy hung the moon. Before I understood how complicated everything was. Before divorce and drugs and death. Just me and my daddy, holding hands under a sunshine I drew with a yellow crayon." She'd pause then, folding the drawing carefully back along its worn creases. That's who he was to me. Not the king of rock and roll. Not the legend. Just my daddy, who loved me enough to carry a child's drawing in his wallet every day for 4 years. Who looked at it when he was sad or scared or tired. Who kept it closer than his money or his credit cards or anything else. And when things get hard, when I'm struggling or doubting or hurting, I take this out and I remember. Love was real. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't enough to save him. But it was real. The interview had been seen by millions. People who'd grown up with Elvis. People who'd mourned him. People who'd judged him. And many of them had cried along with Lisa Marie, understanding finally what it meant to be loved by Elvis Presley, not as a fan, but as a daughter. In the years that followed, Lisa Marie showed the drawing to her own children. Benjamin and Riley, her kids with Danny Kuffel. Harper and Finley, her twins with Michael Lockwood. She wanted them to know their grandfather not as the legend, but as the man. The flawed, struggling, loving man who'd carried a simple drawing in his wallet because it reminded him what mattered. This is what love looks like, she told them. Not perfect. Not fixed or final or fairy tale. Just real. Present. Carried close to your heart even when everything else falls apart. Benjamin had been particularly moved by the drawing. He'd been close to his grandfather's memory, fascinated by the man he'd never met. Lisa Marie had let him hold it once, this boy who looked so much like Elvis it sometimes hurt to look at him. He really kept this with him always? Benjamin had asked, his young voice awed. Always. Through everything. That's how I want to love, Benjamin had said. Like that. Where you keep something close because it matters more than anything fancy or expensive or impressive. Lisa Marie had hugged her son tight, thinking about how love echoes through generations. How her father's love for her was now teaching her children about love. How a simple crayon drawing had become a family heirloom more valuable than all the gold and diamonds and fame. When Benjamin died in 2020, taking his own life at just 27, Lisa Marie took out the drawing again. Sat with it for hours. Remembered her father. Remembered her son. Remembered that love, as powerful and real as it is, can't always save people from their demons. But it matters anyway. It always matters. She kept the drawing in a safety deposit box now, protected from light and air and time. But she had a photograph of it on her phone. Would look at it when she needed to feel connected to her father. When she needed to remember that beneath all the mythology and legend and Elvis Presley industry, there had been a man who loved his daughter. Imperfectly. Desperately. Really. In her final years, Lisa Marie died in January 2023 at 54 years old. She spoke often about her father. About forgiveness. About understanding. About how you can love someone and still acknowledge their failures. How you can grieve someone and still be angry at them. How it's all complicated and messy and true at the same time. And she always came back to the drawing. When people ask me to sum up my father, she said in one of her last interviews, I think about that drawing. I think about a 5-year-old who just wanted her daddy to know she loved him. And a father who kept that drawing in his wallet for 4 years because he needed to remember someone loved him, not for his voice or his looks or his fame, but just because he was daddy. She'd smiled then, that sad, knowing smile of someone who'd spent a lifetime processing loss. We were both so lonely in our own ways. Him trapped in fame. Me trapped in being his daughter. But for a moment, in that drawing, we were just us. Together. Holding hands. And the sun was shining. That's what I want people to remember. Not that my father was perfect or that our relationship was easy. But that love was there. Real love. The kind that carries a child's drawing for 4 years. The kind that keeps you connected even after death. The drawing Lisa Marie made in 1973 has become, in its own way, as iconic as any of Elvis's performances. It represents something the jumpsuits and the gold records and the sold-out shows never could, the human heart beneath the legend. The father beneath the king. When Graceland announced Lisa Marie's death in 2023, they released a statement about her lifelong devotion to preserving her father's memory. They mentioned her music career, her children, her advocacy work. And they mentioned the drawing. Lisa Marie often spoke about a childhood drawing she made for her father, a drawing Elvis kept in his wallet until the day he died. That drawing symbolized their bond. The pure, uncomplicated love between a father and daughter. Today, we mourn the loss of that daughter while celebrating the love that connected them across time and distance and even death. The drawing itself, the actual piece of construction paper, is now in a climate-controlled vault, preserved for future generations. But its image has been shared millions of times. People who never knew Elvis or Lisa Marie have been moved by its simple message: love matters. Connection matters. Keeping someone close to your heart matters, especially when everything else is falling apart. For those of you who remember Elvis, who remember where you were when he died, who remember loving him or judging him or both, this drawing tells you something the tabloids never could. It tells you that beneath the Vegas shows and the prescription pills and the tragic decline, there was a man who loved his daughter, who kept her drawing in his wallet, who looked at it when he needed to remember what mattered. And for those of you who are parents or grandparents yourselves, who've received crayon drawings from small hands and sticky fingers, you understand what that drawing meant. You know why Elvis kept it. You know why it mattered more than gold records. Because your own refrigerator probably holds similar treasures, wobbly stick figures and misspelled love notes and colored outside the lines masterpieces that mean more to you than anything money could buy. That's what Lisa Marie gave the world when she finally shared her father's most treasured possession. A reminder that legends are people. That fame doesn't erase the simple human need to be loved. That sometimes the most valuable thing in a wallet worth thousands is a 5-year-old's crayon drawing. Elvis belonged to the world. But he was also Lisa Marie's daddy. And every time he pulled out that drawing backstage in Vegas, in hotel rooms across America, on sleepless nights when the pills weren't working and the pressure was crushing, he was choosing to remember that second identity. Choosing to hold on to the love that mattered most. Do you remember making drawings for your parents when you were young? Or receiving them from your own children? Do you remember that feeling, the absolute certainty that this picture, this moment, this love was the most important thing in the world? That's what Lisa Marie gave Elvis. And what Elvis gave back by keeping it close to his heart for 4 years. By looking at it thousands of times. By letting it remind him, even in his darkest moments, that he was loved not for what he could do but for who he was. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who remembers Elvis. Leave a comment about your own treasured drawings or notes from your children or grandchildren. Let's remember together that the greatest legacies aren't always the public ones. Sometimes they're folded up in a wallet, carried close to our hearts, reminding us what really matters. And subscribe for more untold stories about the human side of Elvis Presley. Stories that reveal the man behind the legend, the father behind the king. Because your generation knew him, loved him, mourned him. And these stories, these true, heartbreaking, beautiful stories, honor the complicated, real person he was.